All right, so number 9, decide whether the relation is a function and give the domain and range. And number 9, obviously, you can see, is a multiple choice question. You will have multiple choice on your final exam, so this is a good practice of something that you might see. And one of the strategies with multiple choice is eliminating those answers that are definitely not correct. And so let's go ahead and see if we can do that here. Because the directions ask us to decide whether the relation is a function, let's go ahead and before we tackle domain and range, let's go ahead and see if we can figure out if this graph is a function or not. And the way that we do that, you'll recall, is by simply taking a vertical line and dropping it through anywhere on the graph and seeing how many points that vertical line touches on your graph. So if we just take a vertical line and drop it through our graph, how many points on this graph does this blue vertical line touch? Well, just one, right? We could do it again. It would touch just one. We could do it again. It would touch just one. So if you're able to take a vertical line, drop it through your graph, and your vertical line only touches the graph in one place, you have yourself a function. If, however, you take a vertical line, so let's say that the question gave us this graph, for example. If you were able, or rather, if you were to take a vertical line, drop it now through this graph, well, how many places does our vertical line touch? 1, 2. So this is not a function because it touches in more than one place. If you take a vertical line, drop it through your graph, and it only touches your graph in one place, you have yourself a function. So because we have multiple choice, let's see what we have here. A says this is a function, and we know it is a function. So A is a possibility, B not a function. Well, we know this is definitely a function, so B not going to be our answer. All right, C says this is a function, so we know C is a possible answer. D says not a function, so we can eliminate D as well as being one of our answers. So we know that the answer is either A or C. In order to find out which is the correct answer, now we have to move on to the second part of the question, give the domain and range. Well, hopefully you recall that domain refers to the x values, and range refers to the y values. So let's go ahead and first see if we can figure out what the domain is. And so we want to know what the values are of x for this graph. And to do that, what we can imagine, and there should be arrows at the top of this graph here, showing that this graph goes on and on forever and ever. If you were to take this graph and pull it down and stretch it along the x-axis, so if you pretend that the top of this graph here are handlebars, and you want to take this graph and you want to bend it towards each side, towards the x-axis, what would you end up having? You'd end up having a horizontal line, wouldn't you? And with this horizontal line, where is the graph going in each direction? As the graph, once we've bent it towards the x-axis, this graph, because it has an arrow at the end, is heading off towards the left, towards what? Well, the farther we go left, the smaller the number gets, right? And if this goes on and on forever and ever and doesn't stop, this is heading out towards negative infinity, isn't it? And similarly, once we bend the graph down towards the x-axis, this graph goes towards the right forever and ever and ever. And as the graph goes towards the right, the x values are doing what? They're getting bigger and bigger, aren't they? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. This graph never stops, so it must be going out towards positive infinity. And so we can say then for our domain that we have negative infinity to positive infinity. All right, let's see if one of our answers has that as a possibility. Well, here, A, function, we know it's a function. Domain, negative infinity to positive infinity. So we're still, A is still in the running as being a possibility. Here, answer C says function, good. Domain, look here. We don't have negative infinity to positive infinity. So C is going to be eliminated. We know right away because we just tested. We just proved that the domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. So we can go ahead and eliminate C as being an answer as well. Well, what's the only one left? just A. And so for number 9, our answer is A. But let's go ahead and, just for the sake of review, find the range, and you'll see that A ends up still being our answer, but that way you have a review of how to find the range. So here we did our domain. So now let's go ahead and, actually, you know, I'll go ahead and leave that, but I'll use a different color for range. For the range now, we're talking about y values, right? So with your graph, instead of bending it towards the x-axis, now take each side of the graph and push it towards the y-axis. So you're going to smush this graph together. And when you do that, you're going to have just a straight line pointing up, right? You're going to take this side of the graph, push it in, take this side of the graph, push it in, and when you do that, you're going to have a single line that comes together, and that line starts where? On the y-axis. What y value? Well, here's +1, right? Because here's our origin, 0, 0. So +1, +2. So this graph starts at 2, and because this is a filled-in circle, right? We are including 2 as a possible value for y, and the values of y continue to do what? They go up from 2, right? And they're heading off towards +infinity. So our range y values start at 2, and we include 2 as a value, so we use a bracket, and the y values go up and up and up. They never stop towards +infinity. And with infinity, I should have mentioned with domain here, with infinity, no matter whether it's positive or negative, we always use a parentheses. All right, so here's our y value, our range, to infinity, but 2 has a bracket on it, infinity has parentheses. Let's make sure that A matches that. Bracket on 2, comma, infinity, parentheses. Yes, indeed it does. So we know that our answer was correct, but it's always a good idea to double check. All right, so there is number 9. We decided whether the relation was a function, and then we gave its domain and its range.